Good evening and welcome back to Ask 9. I'm Becky Phelps, joined by Jackson Valenti in the studio today.
Yep, long story for you today, but whole lot to talk about. So excited to dive into it a bit deeper.
Yes, this is a really interesting story that we have been, hearing about intensely from our viewers. You've been working on this for how long now?
Couple weeks, probably 3-4 weeks at this point. Like many stories in journalism, kind of started almost by an accident. We had published an article kind of about the Iowa Dental Board's findings to give it a little bit of spoilers and move ahead here. And at a different story, somebody just pulled up right next to me, kind of in a parking lot, and said, "Hey, did you guys post that?" And I said, "We sure did." And he said, "Can I talk to you about it?" He didn't ultimately end up doing an interview with me, but that kind of got us down the path.
Wheels turning.
Yes, and we got. That's just one example, but we had a ton of people reach out to us after posting our original story about the dental board's ruling.
Yes, so we're going to air Jackson's investigation in full for the first time here on Ask 9, but give us just a little bit of background, that original web story that we posted.
So without getting too into the weeds, the gist of it is that the dental board found that a dentist in Coralville had been misdiagnosing patients with severe periodontal disease. It's like, I'm not a dentist, so I don't know too much about in the weeds of what periodontal disease actually is, but in short, gum decay, tooth loss, like it's really bad, basically. It's a very much a diagnosis you don't want to get. It is extremely expensive to treat. So they would diagnose people with this. They would say, "Hey, you need thousands of dollars worth of treatments. We're going to sign you up for this, this, and this." Later on, they find out, oh, we're actually totally healthy. Like, we didn't need any of that treatment. So in short, the investigation into this dentist basically found that was happening seemingly for years, and the dental board found at least 11 instances of it. We had many more people than that reach out to us. I talked to 2 of them to kind of hear a little bit more about their stories in particular.
This is an intense one because obviously it hits people kind of in the heart. You go to an expert, you hope that you can trust their opinion. And so we heard from plenty of people who had a lot of big feelings about this, and some of them kind enough to speak to us on camera. We're going to air that full investigation for you now, what Jackson's been working on for a couple weeks. Here's his I-9.
7 weeks postpartum, brand new mom, scared of everything.
Kim Winchell had just become a mom in April 2021. Her first time away from her newborn was what should have been a routine appointment as a new patient at Coral West Dental in Coralville. But during her gum measurements, the hygienist gave her concerning news.
So now I'm like tearing up, like while I'm getting my teeth measured.
People at the clinic told Winchell she had severe periodontal disease, and even worse, that it could hurt her newborn child.
Pregnancy can mess up your teeth, and like your teeth could fall out. It was also like, and the bacteria can pass into your breast milk and you can make your child sick.
Winchell said she was an anxious mess in the moment and willing to go any length to protect her child. Right away, Coral West gave her options.
Before I even left, they were like, well, like, here's your plan. You need like multiple deep cleanings, and then you need these periodontal trays that you have to wear every night, and they're like $1,000.
She went to a family friend who was a dentist for advice. That friend checked her teeth and found no signs of periodontal disease. To this day, no other dentist has raised any concerns.
Yeah, it felt predatory. I'm pretty sure I said, this is the first time I've left my child for longer than an hour. Like, they knew.
Winchell isn't the only patient Coral West is accused of misdiagnosing.
They were saying that could affect my heart.
I spoke to another patient who wanted to remain anonymous to talk about his medical history. He told me he'd gone to Coral West Dental for around a decade, but during one checkup, his hygienist told him he had severe periodontal disease. He says the clinic immediately pushed him to pay for expensive treatments.
And it seemed like it was all like almost an assembly line. Get over there, get signed up, and out we go.
In the past, he'd taken the dentist's recommendations, but this time he was suspicious.
And if I needed something, I'd get it done or whatever. But this was beyond the pale.
Like Winchell, he went to another dentist for a second opinion and found no problems. Those stories line up with the settlement the Iowa Dental Board reached with Rubel. In it, the board said Rubel knowingly made misleading, deceptive, untrue, or fraudulent representations to patients. The board identified at least 11 times Rubel diagnosed patients with periodontal disease who were in fact completely healthy. The agreement notes one case where Rubel told a patient she could have a stroke or heart attack if she didn't agree to his treatment plan. As part of the settlement, Dr. Rubel didn't admit to doing anything wrong, but agreed to discipline. That discipline, a 2-year probation for a case manager to review random patient files, pay $600 in fees, and take an ethics class. Dr. Rubel kept his license and his practice is still open. His former patients call that punishment a joke.
In my business, they would have yanked my license.
Then I don't know that he should be practicing dentistry anymore.
A lot to unpack.
A lot to unpack there.
A lot to unpack, certainly. To me, the most, just my personal opinion, the most impactful thing there, seemingly manipulating a very new mom. I mean, she was telling me, it was her first time being away from her child, like literally since he was born, like brand new mom. Obviously not something I can relate to in any way, but I can imagine the amount of stress that she had to have already been feeling in that moment. So at least seeming like, when a scheme or a misdiagnosis like this is done to somebody who's already in that weakened mental state, really, really tough to be able to handle that. And luckily for her, she was in a position where she didn't end up ultimately paying for all of those treatments, but she did certainly spend several $100s that she wouldn't have otherwise had, she been diagnosed correctly, and I guess not diagnosed at all with this because she didn't have it. And it didn't break the bank for her or anything, but you can certainly imagine like these types of payments really could be a huge difference maker for somebody.
Dentistry is not cheap.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
And that is something that I think carries a little bit of tension when you go in there and they say, oh, you need this extra thing, and you go, what's that look like? Because, a diagnosis like that, that's the first time probably some people are hearing of that kind of thing. So there is a lot of unknowns, and she spoke to the mental state that she was in, already, full of anxiety. What was that interview like with her? What was the energy, the emotion there?
The reason she wanted it, this was actually, I think, 5 years ago this happened to her, and she doesn't even live in the state anymore. She lives in Arizona now. This is such a big deal to her that she saw this. I don't know how this got to the grapevine and eventually reached her in Arizona, because she's lived there for years now. In 2021 was when this happened, when she lived here. And I believe Iowa City and Coralville. I want to say she moved in 2023. Regardless, this is something she was so passionate about that, years down the line after seeing this, she reached out to us immediately and basically said, yeah, I was a new mom. I feel like they preyed on me, and I want to get that message out there. I think that in particular, because not to downplay the financial aspect of this, that, people could easily lose hundreds, if not thousands of dollars if something like this happens to you. She was in a position where she said, ultimately, like, it didn't break the bank for us. Mm-hmm. But when you're a new mom and you're told, like, I might have been poisoning my kid, if you're breastfeeding and they're saying your bacteria is from your gums is getting it into your breast milk, I mean, that's a shocking thing to hear. But that's the reason why she ultimately wanted to do that interview, was like, I felt manipulated, I felt taken advantage of in a vulnerable time.
I think that's interesting to note, that it is, 5 years after the fact, and she is clearly still feeling those emotions, and that has stuck with her.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
We had another interview in there, someone who we chose to keep anonymous as part of that story. That's not a common thing for us, but occasionally we do understand as a station that being on a broadcast can impact you in some way. Can you speak a little to the decision to allow that person to testify in this story, be a part of the broadcast anonymously? Mm-hmm.
So just to be fully transparent with you guys at home, the main thing in kind of keeping an eye on it, whether people should remain anonymous, really the thing we try to look at is like, can this person face substantive harm if they're not remaining anonymous? Can there be retaliation against this person? Or is it like, are they discussing really maybe sensitive medical information? This gentleman in particular, I think it was for him, at least speaking to him, it was a combination of, I'm afraid of retaliation, frankly. His thought process was, well, if I think that this company potentially is maybe already doing things that they shouldn't be doing, maybe they can falsify records to come after me. Not that that's necessarily going to happen, right? But that's a serious concern that
He had some fears.
that gentleman had. And I think that's a fair thing to offer. We actually offered Kim Winchell, the new mom, we actually offered the interview for her to be anonymous as well, and she chose not to. Mostly in being one, for her, it was she wanted to be able to tell that story of, I'm a new mom, here's the experience I'm at, which you obviously wouldn't necessarily be able to do if you were made anonymous. That'd be a lot of information that you could probably pretty easily figure that person out.
Right.
She specifically wanted to be
On the record.
named on the record. But again, I think it's just given a really sensitive story like this one, 95, 99% of the time are not going to do that for any story, as you know. But it's a really careful thought process of, can this person face retaliation? Would they not go on camera? Would they not talk to us at all if we didn't allow them to be anonymous? Now, of course, if you're doing a story about adopting dogs and cats, you wouldn't have the person go anonymous if they don't want to be on camera.
Some
You
stories,
just find
yeah.
somebody else to talk to, right?
Yeah. Some stories are very specific.
But for something like this that is so potentially in the weeds of people's sensitive medical information,
Yeah.
this is a rare instance where you would consider it.
And we do, whenever we allow someone to speak anonymously, we put a lot of effort into making sure that we know they are who they say they are. So even if we're not conveying that information to you, the viewer, we are very confident that this person is who they say they are and that their story is truthful.
Correct.
As to the best of our abilities.
And there's a ton of stuff that I don't have in this story. Like, I have credit card statements that, so I can at least verify to some extent, here's how much they paid, here's how much they lost. Again, I'm not going to show people's credit card statements on the news. But just to give you an idea of some of the background that we might go through to ensure that, not that we're saying people are going to come to us and just make up stories, but just to do that extra
We have
little
to do our due
legwork,
diligence.
just to do that due diligence and make sure that okay, we're hearing from people who certainly did experience this stuff. I mean, we're not publishing in this unless there's beyond a shadow of a doubt that these were real patients that were at this clinic at a certain point in time. Both of them actually from years prior who saw this story and were interested, even though this had not happened to them for years. So interesting, at least in that regard. Even for that anonymous individual, he was there. I won't give too specific of a date, but he was there several years ago. It had been years since he'd been and had that happen to him.
We do also want to say that we have a statement from Dr. Rubel's office that said it cooperated with the dental board's investigation and emphasized that as part of the settlement, they did not admit to any guilt. Again, that settlement was $600 fine, an ethics course.
Correct. Ethics and education course. Technically, it's $200-300 fees over the course of 2 years. They have a probationary period, but yes, $600 in fees. That's the way I word it in the story. And that kind of leads us into the second aspect of this story, where it goes a little bit away from what actually happened at that clinic and more of the dental board's ruling in response. I'm not trying to be too editorializing when I say this, but at the very least, the two patients I interviewed said were a little bit astounded by that ruling, that's such a low punishment, seemingly.
Yeah.
Again, without trying to editorialize too much, you could easily come to the conclusion that if this scheme was done to 11 different patients and they made roughly $200 to $400 each time, they've already made more from doing it than the fees would incur.
Yeah, the people that we heard from about this story had very strong opinions on that settlement.
Yeah, I mean, the two that I talked to said he should lose his license. Yeah. And what's interesting is that the dental board did respond to me when I asked them about kind of the nature of that ruling, because I did reach out to them and say, okay, how do you come to your, how do you investigate these cases?
That's a great question.
How do you take these complaints? How do you go through their records? If you find cases of wrongdoing, which the dental board found in at least 11 patients, how do you come to a fair ruling that is a reasonable punishment, so to speak, for whatever that clinic has done? All the dental board said was, I think it was something along the lines of the dental board does not comment on its rulings, which was obviously a very unsatisfying answer. We have put out a Freedom of Information request to try to get a little bit more information, not necessarily on this individual case, but more on like, how do they do their other cases? Really what we're looking for is how many complaints do they get in total? How many clinics have they investigated in total? Really that can give us a better idea of, over the past 5 years, if they've investigated, let's say, I'm going to make up a number, let's say they've investigated 100 clinics and they've revoked 0 licenses. That can give us a good idea of, okay, they just don't ever revoke licenses, no matter what's going on. Maybe we'll look into it and we'll get the numbers back. Again, we don't have any of these numbers yet, so don't take any of the numbers I'm, giving as example as law necessarily. Maybe we end up getting back, oh, they've investigated 100 clinics and they've revoked 20 licenses. It'll give us a better idea of what's their general practice. Again, we're still waiting on those records. It'll probably be, a few weeks. Usually they're not fast in getting this stuff back.
Sure. That is very interesting, though.
But yeah.
Because this headline pops out, and even from people that were not directly involved or impacted, there was a big response from the community. So it's a headline that you don't see very often. And, we've had some other stories recently of, licenses being impacted. Anytime there's like a medical professional and a license, or a complaint, there are a lot of feelings, even from people not involved. So it is a great question of like, is this common? Are complaints like this common? That's something that we definitely want to look into and follow up on.
Right. And once we get that data back, again, I did request for the past 5 years, so it would give us, ideally if there's no like huge outlier year, we'd have a good idea of how many complaints they get in a given year. Yeah, we get a good idea of it through those 5 years. We wanted to have it after COVID, so there wouldn't be like a drastic, like 0 complaints. Yeah, people are probably not, there were probably very little.
Did I have a dentist's appointment in 2020?
I don't know.
Unlikely.
I don't know if I did, to be honest
Unlikely.
with you. Yeah, I don't know. I would have been like 18 at the time. But,
I'm sure my dentist remembers.
But I don't know if I went to the dentist at all in COVID. So we were like, okay, let's just not bother with the COVID year. Let's get every year after that. But that should give us a good idea about what's going on there. And one thing that I want to piggyback off of what you just said is that in hearing this response, it wasn't just patients. To give a little bit of a spoiler, we haven't done this next part of the story yet, and this obviously wasn't a part of what we just aired for you all, but we actually had staff reach out to us as well. So former staff wanting to talk about this practice. I haven't done those interviews yet. I haven't met with those people, but all I could say is that we have had former staff reach out to us about this story, wanting to share their experiences, whether or not they're going to say that they were...
Yeah, we will see what that story will look like, but...
Whether or not they can say that any of this was happening definitively, who knows? But we've had staff reach out to us. They're interested in talking, so there will be more with this story to come. We've reached out to the Dental Association. There's a lot of people we're yet to hear from. This coverage is certainly going to continue, is I guess the short of what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. This is just part 1 of this investigation that Jackson has been working on and getting some numbers on. But we wanted to, bring that to you and give you some context, especially, as we do these in-depth stories, there's a lot of work. Oftentimes, our reporters go out and they do a day turn story where they get the idea in the morning and they turn it by the 4 o'clock news. Investigations like this take work, they take time, and they take FOIAs and lots of interviews. So we will have follow-ups on this in the coming weeks.
Well, and it's also one of those situations where, like you mentioned, sometimes it will take a part 1 like this. We have reached out to Coral West Dental and Dr. Rupel's office several times. They are well aware that we're doing this story. The chances that we hear back from them after this is now published, I would say, is probably much higher than before. We've gotten statements from them. Obviously, I included that statement in that story of that they're not admitting to any wrongdoing. But I would say that we're likely to hear more from them in the coming weeks, especially as we do more of this investigation. We'll see if they end up going on camera or not, but I would say we're more likely to hear from them for sure.
We're definitely open to that interview.
For sure. Yeah.
Again, part 1, it will air again tonight on the TV9 News at 10, and we will have this in-depth breakdown available for you guys very soon, coming up on the KCRG website and app. But Jackson, thank you so much for joining us here on Ask 9.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And thank you guys for joining us as well. As always, if you've got anything you'd like us to take a look into, send us a message on Facebook, send us an email. We always want to know what questions you guys have on your minds. Have a great evening.